What's up, everybody? Before we start the show and talk about UFC 313, all the action there, just wanted to say this one more time. We got our first live podcast, March 22nd, 8 p.m. at Knucklehead Vintage. If you guys are in New Jersey, definitely pull up. We're going to have a really good time. We have some live guests, live music performances, giveaways, a whole lot more. We're going to be talking UFC London. It's going to be a really fun time. And even before that, I guess we might as well say this too, 3 p.m. on the channel, we're going to have a live fight companion watching UFC London main card with the guys there at Knucklehead Vintage. It's going to be a real fun time. And then, like I said, after that, 8 p.m., pull up if you're in the area, watch on the channel if you're not. We have our first live podcast. It's going to be a really good time.
Plenty of secret juice samples to give out.
Yeah, well, I don't know how many people want our secret juice / tap water. You've had it.
Yeah, I've already given everybody a glimpse of what it's like.
I haven't refilled
You
it.
don't want it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sink water, at least around here, ain't too great. But let's talk about UFC 313, man. There was a lot of action to get into, a lot of really fun fights, fun finishes. But I think you have to start with the main event and what transpired there. Magomed Ankalaev defeats Alex Pereira, gets the UFC light heavyweight title. He wins by unanimous decision, 248-47, 149-46. And I said this to you before we started. Before we get into the fight itself, I honestly want to start this with one of my takes here because I've seen a lot of stuff on social media in the past half day or so, since the fights. And there's a lot of people, pundits, a bunch of people otherwise, who are saying that this is a very shocking result. And I just don't agree with that. I understand thinking that Pereira is going to win and thinking that Pereira is this very special fighter. But stylistically, Magomed Ankalaev was such a nightmare matchup for him. We talked about it on the show last week. Pereira struggles against good southpaw strikers and people who have good wrestling. And Magomed Ankalaev has both of those things. And to me, I wasn't sure how this fight would go. But at the same time, seeing how it went, I'm not shocked by it. Because Magomed Ankalaev pressured Alex Pereira really well, and he made Alex very gun-shy because of the threat of the wrestling and also even the threat of the striking, in a sense. And he just did really well in the clinch. It wasn't the most entertaining fight of all time, but I think if you thought that Ankalaev was going to win this fight, it went about as expected.
Well, all right, let me ask you this then. When you say nightmare matchup, because part of me feels like that can be an exaggeration. If it's not after the fight, if the winner doesn't completely, which okay on the scorecards how it's gonna show up is all that matters at the end of the day. But I mean, there were a lot of 40. How many? What was it? 249.
No, 248. Close fight. I mean, it was a close fight, and I think it was a close.
It was a close fight than the scorecard would suggest, to be honest. But when you say a nightmare matchup, is that easier for you to say now that the fights happen, or before going in? You just always were like.
I've still kind of thought that it wasn't because I thought that Pereira was going to lose necessarily, but I thought that this was a very risky fight for him, and I think that's why the UFC waited so long to make it, because they're like, if anybody has the style to beat this guy, it's Ankalaev. And when you think of the fight itself, yeah, it was close in terms of the round-by-round score, but when you think of Alex Pereira's past performances versus this one, I mean, he just didn't look good in this fight whatsoever. He was very gun-shy. Even in the rounds that he won, he just didn't look as good as we usually see him, and it just seemed like he was worried about that clinch game and that wrestling game of Ankalaev, and that opened up the striking for him too, which is why I think being well-rounded in MMA means so much. And while Pereira is so elite on the feet, I think that Ankalaev being so well-rounded was really a problem for him in this fight. And then, like I said, on the feet, Pereira doesn't usually do as well when it comes to southpaw fighters. And then, like I said, you already have a guy who's a good striker who's southpaw, but then he also has really good wrestling. And I think that just the combination of that like I said, I just think that was a nightmare matchup. Not saying that I thought that he was going to lose, but I'm like, if he's going to, it's going to be to a guy like this. And obviously that's what ended up happening. So, but that's just how I feel. I just don't think it was that shocking. I thought that this was a very closely matched fight. And I thought that either guy could walk away with a win here, which is what the intrigue was to me.
Well, the intrigue for me was if the fight went to the ground and Alex Pereira had to start working off of his back. That's what I wanted to see. I want to see if maybe he could close guard or something. Maybe go even just attempt like an arm bar or a triangle. But all it really took was Ankalaev. I think what stood out to me the most, because it wasn't the stand-up other than the fact that Alex was circling almost the entire fight, felt like, fighting off the back foot. It was more once Ankalaev got him in the clinch, I thought those knees he was delivering were very strong. But I think there was a instance probably in the last round where Ankalaev briefly had Alex's back but couldn't get him to the ground. But other than that, I think, and you were talking about pundits before, I think a lot of them probably are more so not. I think they're exaggerating with being shocked, but it's more, hey, how did he make this look so easy against such a dominant champion that we've grown accustomed to watching at this point?
I mean, did you see what Ankalaev said afterwards? I thought that he had a pretty good point in his post-fight press conference. Not the interview in the octagon, but like when they're in the room with the media. He was saying that, people say I'm boring, but it's like every fighter who comes up against me who they say is super exciting, I think he kind of was just making the point that he neutralizes these people, and it's like, well, everybody seems like they're boring against me because I shut them down. And I'm like, I mean,
Alex
I kind of get that. But
absolutely exhausted.
He just looked like he didn't really have much confidence in there after the clinch started to get introduced. Because the first round was kind of like more of a feeling out process. But then after that, it just seemed like Ankalaev was, like you said, he was on the front foot. He was backing Pereira up. And while Pereira is better than most at fighting with a counter-striking style, in the past he's definitely done a lot better when he's walking dudes down. And it looked like he didn't really have any answers for Ankalaev's footwork and trying to cut off the cage.
Yeah, he's way better walking people down than having a counter straight. But he can do it. It's just, I don't think Ankalaev was giving him that much to counter anyways. It was just the threat of the takedown the entire time.
Which is a credit to Ankalaev, though. I mean, yeah, you could say, oh, well, Pereira defended all those takedowns, but at the same time, if he couldn't create more offense, that's not Ankalaev's problem. Like, Ankalaev's trying to win a championship here, and I get that MMA fans sometimes, like, and especially with Alex Pereira, because I think me and you both agree he's one of the most exciting fighters in the sport. I think right now he's the face of the UFC, outside of somebody like Conor McGregor, who's not active. I don't know. I think that people are being more harsh on Ankalaev because they don't like the way that he won this fight. But I do think he clearly won it. Like, yes, it was close on the scorecards. But when you look at Pereira's last few performances versus this one, this was not the performance of a champion. And I just don't think he did enough to win. And I think Ankalaev did just enough. And that's just how I feel about it. And the UFC...
I mean, it was one of those things where, at least even in the clinch, you see Ankalaev with double underhooks, and Alex is just, like I said, he looks so exhausted, trying every which way to pummel or just get Ankalaev off of him, and there was nothing. There was nothing giving for Alex to get out of those clinch situations.
I mean, Ankalaev fights dudes with that stifling style. He that's why he's won this many fights in a row. I mean, he had the one draw, but besides that, I mean, now with this Pereira win, I think he's on, a 14-fight unbeaten streak. It's unbelievable how good Ankalaev's been. I think he's been one of the most perpetually underrated light heavyweights, and you know this. I've been high on Ankalaev for a very long time now, and to see him get this win, it's definitely something else, man, because it took him long enough to get that title shot. And some of that is because of his style. But again, like I said, with a guy like Pereira, who's such a big star, the UFC knew that this was going to be a tough matchup. I'm not sure. I think that they probably thought about it like I did. Not sure if he was going to lose to Ankalaev, but knowing that it was a pretty big risk and wanting to get the most out of that star champion before you put him up against a guy like Ankalaev, who maybe doesn't have the most exciting style, but has an effective style to win fights and win a fight versus a guy like Alex Pereira. I mean, I wasn't super impressed by Ankalaev's performance, but at the end of the day, I do think he did enough, and he's the champion, whether people like it or not. But the UFC, they want to go with that immediate rematch, most likely, according to Dana White.
A lot of people don't like it, and UFC themselves, I bet you they're definitely not waking up happy today.
No, I don't think Dana was too... I don't know if you saw this. I forget who sent me this. It might have been Jimmy. It was a video of Dana talking to Bruce Buffer right before the decision was announced, and you see him looking at the card that Bruce Buffer's reading off of, and the look on his face, he's just like... Dana's like about to throw a temper tantrum because his guy lost. No, but for real,
I mean, bro,
so
if you
funny.
think about it like this, Brendan Schaub made a very good point. I mean, Brendan Schaub's probably one of those quote-unquote insider podcasters.
I mean, people give him shit, but he's a former fighter. He was in the top 10 at heavy. He was a good fighter in his day. I know
really just, I don't want to say screwed up, because like what am I gonna make Ankalaev seem like some asshole or whatever? Like, no, he won the world title.
Did what he had to do.
But it definitely altered the UFC's year-long plans.
Oh yeah,
1,000%.
100%.
And now they really have to scramble for not only light 205 but also heavyweight too.
Well, let me say this, because I do think that this is what the UFC's line of thought is in terms of the light heavyweight division right now. So after the fights, Dana White obviously says that we're probably going to get an immediate rematch for Pereira against Ankalaev. And while people might not be clamoring for that, I think business-wise it makes the most sense, because Pereira, if he wins the rematch, then you have a trilogy that you can sell with him and a big rival in Ankalaev. But if Ankalaev wins the rematch, then you can sell Ankalaev on the fact that he's beaten someone like Alex Pereira not once, but twice. So, yeah, fans might not be clamoring for it, but I think in the long run, it'll be good for the UFC, because it's a win-win after the rematch, because you'll be able to market the winner of that no matter what.
I'm pretty curious to know about, let's say, let's call it a rematch clause, right? And like these fighters' contracts and stuff, whenever, I wonder how that works for a champion, if they know, like, either the second they win the belt that they're like told that they're obligated a rematch or something. I guess is it all like dependent? Boxing. Is it all
Like, I don't think it's in their contracts. Maybe for someone like McGregor, it might have been, like with Nate Diaz, if you remember.
Yeah.
Because like I think after Conor lost that first fight versus Nate, the UFC was like, all right, well, we might have to see if you can get that one back, because he's our champion. He just lost to a non-champion in a different weight class. Like, I don't know. I think it's only reserved for those like peak fighters, which Pereira, you could argue, is one of those guys. But at the same time, I think the UFC doesn't put that type of stuff in their contracts, just because it kind of takes the leverage away from the promotion, which is, in a way, is sort of like the PFL's problem. Yeah, on the surface, it seems like you'd want the fighters to dictate what happens by what happens inside the cage only. But for the UFC, where promotion is such a big deal, I don't think that they want to ever put themselves in a position where they don't have the power contractually. And I think if they were to give like the immediate rematch type of clause in a bunch of these contracts, we'd have more immediate rematches than we probably would like. Because once you set the precedent, you have to keep doing it. Like, even if it's a champion who the UFC isn't really like a fan of, then they have to give that guy or that girl an immediate rematch clause if they lose the title. I think that that's something that they never really wanted to. That's just my opinion.
And the another side of it, I guess, for the fighter that just won, so the new champion, kind of like right after they win, like knowing who their next opponent's gonna be already, and then that's probably lingers around. And how much do you really get to enjoy the fruits of being a world champion? And now,
yeah, well, Ankalaev, he was trying to talk a little bit to Yuri Prohashka, but I don't think that fight happens first. I think that there's more for the UFC to gain.
yeah.
by having the
So
immediate rematch.
is it? Let's say in this case, in particular, it's more so just a state of the division, right? Because Alex
Yeah.
pretty much cleared out this entire, let's say, top 5, top 8 of contenders, and now, Ankalaev just dethroned him. So how much do you need to see Ankalaev beat people that Alex already beat?
Well, my thing is, like, if Ankalaev fights Yuri Prohashka and wins and then has another Pereira fight, like, I just don't see the point, because then if Pereira beats Ankalaev, then Yuri Prohashka is like 10 steps back. And that's like outside of Pereira right now, he's probably the top contender in that division. And it's a rough spot. That's why I think the UFC will probably go with that immediate rematch, because then if Ankalaev wins, like I said, they can sell it as he's the guy who just beat Pereira twice, this boogeyman in that division, and now he's going to fight the rest of these contenders at light heavyweight. Because then you could still sell a fight with Yuri if he beats Pereira again. So in my view, I just don't think that there's much to lose by waiting on that one versus trying to force it right now just to get Ankalaev maybe a fun title defense or to get Yuri the belt back. But I don't know, man. Light heavyweight's in an interesting spot. I think after John Jones, it's been really fascinating because we had a few very short reigns. Then Pereira had a really nice one, and now Ankalaev, he has the potential to have a really nice reign. He has the all-around skill set to be champion for a long time, but we'll see what happens if they do that immediate rematch, which I think they will.
For sure. I think you're, in a way, you're kind of seeing it with all the champions throughout UFC. I think it's that I won't even say that day and age, but clearly I think even more casual fans seeing, the grappler kind of really rise to the top, the wrestler like really rise to the top, and they're using that to their complete advantage to get the belt. And so, now it's time to just stay there. So
it's mixed martial arts at the end of the day. That's how I feel. If you hate wrestling and grappling, you're watching the wrong sport, because if you can dictate where the fight is, that's all that matters at the end of the day. And I think if you're a good wrestler, you got
Islam, Bilal Muhammad, and now Magomed Ankalaev. So,
I mean, even John Jones to an extent at heavyweight, he's a wrestler.
Yeah,
it's definitely interesting, man. I'm curious to see what happens next at 205 and how soon we get some clarity on there. What's up, guys? Sorry to interrupt the podcast real quick, but we have a message for you guys.
If you enjoy the Her Handbook's content, you want to see more, consider subscribing to the channel, leaving a like on the videos, all sorts of fight content as much as possible, podcasts, interviews, vlogs. We have it all over here, so thank you, appreciate it.
We appreciate you, and like he said, please subscribe, and now back to the show. But until then, let's keep talking about the rest of this card, man, because there's plenty more action to get into. And the next thing I want to talk about is that co-main event, Justin Gaethje versus Rafael Fiziev 2. Another war, just like their first fight. Although this one was a bit more clear than their last one. Justin Gaethje wins unanimous decision. All three judges scored at 29-28.
Shout out to Rafael Fiziev, though.
Yes, very much so. I mean, dude, he took that fight on, 12 days notice?
Yeah, short notice, against the guy who already won, lost to, and had an amazing fight with the first time around. So this time now you're on the pay-per-view stage. So, yeah.
I mean, it's great for Fiziev. I mean, that first fight was UFC 286.
I think he had to go for broke like he did in the first round. I don't, because we saw if it went the distance again. I don't think he clearly didn't have much to give after the first round, and more in terms of cardio and
Yeah, I mean,
energy.
and you can't really blame him for that. Like, that's kind of the short notice aspect
Justin
of it.
Gaethje already, the elite striker that he is. I mean,
Well, that was 2 elite strikers, if you ask me. I know Fiziev kind of faded a bit as the fight
but I
went,
think, but still, like Gaethje's conditioning is just, and the power it
his
propelled
power
him
is
ahead.
unreal. I don't know how Fiziev...
The power, especially, yeah.
He got hit with a head kick at one point.
Because Fiziev's just very fast with his.
I was thinking the same thing. It's wild to watch that speed.
He's in and out. I mean, the way he's able to land too, like that's a lot to deal with. So that's one of those things where you definitely could see a first round finish in the works. Are you
shocked that this went the distance or no?
Because
the first fight did, so it's not like it's a crazy question.
I don't think I'm shocked. I think I'd be more shocked if Fiziev got the nod.
That would be nuts. I mean, some people were thinking that Gaethje's chin might be compromised after that crazy knockout to Max, but Gaethje's a smart dude. That's why he took so much time off in between, and he looked really good in this fight. I mean, in rounds 2 and 3, that was really like a striking masterclass. The combinations that he was hitting him with, that uppercut in round 2 that he dropped him with, I thought that was going to be the end of the fight, but obviously it wasn't. Shout out to Fiziev.
Yeah, I think there's just certain guys in the sport that you just never expect to see get finished, and when it does happen, it's such a shock that you really do start to doubt. So we were like with Justin Gaethje, for instance, after Max Holloway, and that was at the final second. After Justin already had nothing left to give, he still was like he couldn't resist the urge to take center with Max, and that was all she wrote. So like
ending that fight, by the way.
yeah, exactly. You get chills just thinking about it, talking about it. So that's what makes it even crazier for me to think that people could see that, and then now we're talking about was Justin Gaethje on the decline. Like, are we ever going to see him actually fight for the belt again? And it's like he's already number 3 coming into the fight.
I was gonna say, now we're here.
Yeah, now we're here. Exactly. That's all it really takes. Even when he's fighting way down, someone stepping in on short notice, you still are reminded that he's the most entertaining fighter on the roster.
Yeah, and that's why
arguably the best striker on the roster. Exactly.
He's so fun to watch, and you
see those uppercuts, bro. The one he dropped Fiziev with, first of all, and then after that he went for he landed 2 more.
I genuinely can't believe that first uppercut that dropped him didn't. I really thought that was going to be the end of the fight, and Fiziev hung tough in there, which, I mean,
Fiziev's one tough son of a bitch.
I love this fight. I wish this was like another fight, kind of. Remember we were talking about Turbiev and Bivol? I was like, I want to see these dudes fight 1,000 times. This will be the co-main of that. I want to see these 2 guys fight another 1,000 times.
You were talking about how after the Max fight, everyone was doubting Justin's chin.
Yeah, a lot of people were saying. I honestly, I didn't really agree with that, but yeah. It was a narrative coming in, especially fight week. I saw a lot of that stuff. People saying, I don't know how Gaethje's going to look after such a bad knockout like that. But at the same time, that was in April of 2024.
Yeah, and that
almost
was last year.
Yeah, he was smart. He took a lot of time off. So, and it's not like Gaethje's taken he hasn't had the craziest amount of knockout losses. He's been in some wars, that's for sure. But
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, this fight he looked really good against an elite striker, and Gaethje, he sees a title shot in the near future. I don't exactly disagree with that. There's a lot going on at lightweight right now, especially with Ilia Topuria moving up. And my point of view is Justin Gaethje's one of the most exciting fighters, if not the most exciting fighter in the UFC. And because of that, he's never going to be far from a title shot. Whether you love that or you hate that, it's just the truth. I think that his next fight is a title fight, whether that be outright against Islam Makhachev or the winner of Islam Makhachev versus Ilia Topuria, if they go in that direction. I do think a title shot is next for Justin Gaethje. But I don't know if you agree or disagree with that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
that's it.
How could you complain? I get that people, they want to see the true best fight the best, but Justin Gaethje's so exciting. How could you be mad if that guy gets a title shot?
Mm-hmm.
Even if you don't think that he has what it takes to beat Islam Makhachev. But I don't know. My personal opinion, I think that they're probably going to go Makhachev versus Topuria, and then he fights the winner. That's what I think, personally. But we'll see. I don't really know. That's all I got with that one though. I don't know if you have any other comment on this fight before we move on, but
Nah, it's just good to see the highlight. Just going back and doing his thing pretty much. Like we all know. So yeah, I guess some people just need to be like hit with that shock where it's like, they're still human at the end of the day. Everyone's still capable of getting knocked out.
yeah,
So, even like Alex, you think about Alex in the main event and talk about his chin, like we've seen him get knocked out before too. So it
yeah,
can happen to anybody, Yeah.
yeah. They're all human, whether we want to believe that
Exactly.
or not. They're all
So,
human beings.
you know,
So
it's really easy for us MMA fans to jump the gun, but once enough time has passed, and a guy like Justin Gaethje, he can get his he can get back on the right track. So yeah.
And respect to Gaethje too for even taking this fight in the first place. He definitely could have just pulled out and been like, reschedule the fight with Dan Hooker, but he's a dog. He had a full camp, wanted to fight. And so we get this war versus Fiziev.
Nah, title shots. We need Justin Gaethje back in the main event.
Isn't it wild that he hasn't fought Islam Makhachev yet? Just like from circumstance, I was really thinking about that. I'm like, damn, he's been at the top for as long as he's been there. Like that Max Holloway fight kind of put him back a little bit, but yeah, he hasn't fought Islam Makhachev. That's a fresh contender, so that's why I think it's pretty likely because we haven't seen it yet. But to talk about another lightweight fight that had a crazy finish, Ignacio Bahamondes submits Jalen Turner. Crazy triangle choke in round one. Jalen Turner spontaneously retires post-fight outside of the cage. A lot to get into here, but
yeah.
First thing we have to talk about, that triangle was just nuts, dude. It was a great finish. I think Bahamondes is so underrated because you think about his past few fights over the past few years, he's had some crazy finishes both on the feet and on the ground. A few years ago he had that crazy spinning wheel kick. I think it was in the Apex. Now he has this fight facing Jalen Turner, who's in the top 15. He gets that submission, but he's had other submissions in the past too. This guy's really good on the feet. He's really good on the ground, and now he's in the top 15 at lightweight. I'm super excited to see this dude move through the division, and I don't really want to give Jalen Turner a bunch of shit for losing a fight to this guy because, yeah, he's kind of making his name off of Jalen here a little bit, but I do think that this dude is a really good prospect, and I think that we're going to see him in some pretty big fights in the future. That's just my personal opinion, but, dude, what did you think of Ignacio's performance here?
Yeah, it's one of those fights where you expect a finish anyways, but I think more so probably a knockout would be the more likely bet when a fight like this. These two guys you already know are very active on the feet, but man, Bahamondes I don't think even clearly Jalen Turner I don't think he saw that finish coming either. To do that off your back is so impressive. So
and he was kind of like he was in his guard, and then it just like that he just cinched that triangle up, and it just looked like Jalen had no idea what just hit him, and he tapped pretty fast, but the choke was deep. He got him in it. Clear as day. It was just a really nice finish over, like I said, what is a quality opponent, and I do hope that Jalen Turner doesn't stay retired. Just because he's 29, he has so much talent.
It's just tough because when you're already sliding down the rankings and now you're taking on an unranked name and he does this to you, it's just this division, maybe in another division, but lightweight especially, it's gonna take a long time to get. And even for Bahamondes, it could be pretty tough. But yeah. I think Bahamondes clearly is,
he's proven himself in a big way.
Himself in a huge way. So
with Turner though, we were talking about this a little bit before. He's 1-4 in his last 5, which on the surface sounds horrible, but when you look at his Tapology page, his last 5 fights, he just lost to Bahamondes. Before that, he lost to Renato Moicano, who obviously just fought for the title. But at the same time, he lost that fight, but he looked really good in the first round of it. And then he beat King Green before that. But then before that fight, his 2 losses were to Dan Hooker and Matus Gamrot, both of whom are elite fighters at lightweight. So that's just... It's unfortunate that that's what you see. You see the 1-4 record, but I do think the quality of competition matters. I don't know if he was just emotional kind of after the fight going the way that it went, or if he's maybe been thinking about this, but it would suck to see him go, because I do think he still has a lot of potential. It's not like he's old. He's only 29. There's a lot that he can still do in this sport. Yeah, it might take a while, but at the same time, Jalen Turner has that type of style where he has a lot of exciting finishes, and if he can just, maybe get back on track, I think that he could definitely get back into the top 15 and maybe get more towards that upper echelon. But I don't know if he really wants to hang him up, it is what it is, and I hope that he's making a decision that makes him happy at the end of the day, because he's been an entertaining fighter the whole time he's been in the UFC. So whatever he wants to do, he should do it. But I do think that he still has a lot left to give if he's willing to give it. And this fight was just an unfortunate loss to a guy who, he might not have a big name, but he's a very underrated prospect, if you ask me. I do think that Bahamondes is so well-rounded. He's an elite striker. His jiu-jitsu is phenomenal. And I think that we're going to see that dude near the top at lightweight pretty soon, too. And, I just think that this is a loss that's going to age well for Jalen Turner, when it seems like it might not be that that good right now. I think maybe a year from now, when Bahamondes is fighting the more elite fighters at lightweight, we're going to be like, that was it's just unfortunate. He ran into the wrong guy at the wrong time. But I guess we'll see.
I feel like Bahamondes could be one of these buzzsaws that someone probably above him is really not gonna want to fight. But and so I hope, hopefully he doesn't get slow tracked, because he's definitely ready for
He's so exciting. He does not need to be slow tracked.
Yeah.
I mean, Bilal, I think he trains with Bilal Muhammad, and I've heard Bilal talking about him for the past 3 years of how good this dude is, and he's one of his best sparring partners. So, I mean, you're getting praise like that from a pretty good champion in Bilal Muhammad. I think that matters, and I more so than pundits, I take fighters' opinions of other fighters a lot more seriously, and I think that that's just fair to do. And maybe that's a bit hypocritical, because here me and you are talking about these guys, but if someone's a champion in the UFC, it's just the truth. Their opinion just matters that much more. And if Bilal Muhammad says that Bahamondes is a really good fighter, I tend to agree with him. But let's talk about this fight real quick before that. Amanda Lemos versus Yasmin Lucindo. Lemos wins the fight, unanimous decision. And this fight was just not it. Not every fight is going to be a barn burner. I don't really know why they put this fight exactly. Well, I do know why they put it where it was. For the rankings, this was a big fight for the strawweight division. And I would imagine they were probably thinking that we might get a nice knockout from Amanda Lemos, or a good performance by Yasmin Lucindo, who did come into this fight pretty hot, coming off that win versus Marina Rodriguez. And the matchup just seemed right going in, but when you watch it in the cage, it just didn't really work out. And Lucindo just didn't seem ready to take that next step and beat that top 5 strawweight in Lemos. And now Amanda Lemos is just, she's still kind of in the same spot where she was before. She's in the top 5. She's not that far from another title shot. But at the same time, there's still probably another couple of fights to get there. And considering this fight was not exciting really at all, it definitely took a lot of excitement out of the room, especially after the fight before that, as we'll get to. But yeah, man, I wish I had more to say about this fight, but I really just want to emphasize that I do think Amanda Lemos is a really good fighter. I think that she has the potential to get back to the title, but this fight was just, it's not it.
Nothing to write, yeah.
Nothing,
not for sure.
Nothing to write home about for this one.
I mean, it was cool, I guess, to see Lucindo do all this passing, but I mean, it's not like she really even went for anything.
As I'm saying,
she just
wasn't doing enough.
Any kind of real submission or throwing strikes either. It's just kind of one of those.
She just seemed overwhelmed. I don't know if it was by the moment or by Lemos herself. It just wasn't a good showing for Lucindo, and to be honest, it wasn't even that crazy of a showing for Amanda Lemos, who I think is a lot better than what she showed.
Well, yeah, fight, takes two to tango.
Yeah, I mean, not every fight's gonna be a good fight. That's just the truth of it. That's my takeaway from this one. But
I think Lemos should still get a good fight after that.
Oh yeah, 100%. I just when I look at the rankings, that's like my only thing. I'm not really sure where you go with her, just because you look at strawweight, Zhang Weili's the champion, Yan Xiaonan is the number 1 contender. I mean, she already has a fight booked versus Virna Jandiroba, so those two are booked. Tatiana Suarez literally just lost, so I don't really know if they want to make a fight like that. And then she's already fought Jessica Andrade, so like that's all the people that are in front of her. I just think that she's gonna have to wait for the division to shake out a little bit, and we'll see where the rankings go from there. But yeah, I say we just move on to the next fight, because I'm sure that's what people want to hear about, considering it was one of the craziest finishes that we've seen this year.
Yeah, you gotta hear it. You gotta just see it if you have.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, but for those who didn't, Mauricio Ruffy hits hits King Green with what is definitely so far the knockout of the year. Yeah, I mean, Ruffy hits
the fighting nerd from the Fighting Nerds.
Yeah, man. I mean, that spinning wheel kick by Ruffy over Green was just insane. Green did not see it coming at all. And part of that is because of how well Ruffy hit it. I mean, feinting that quick 2-punch combination and then flowing right into the spinning wheel kick in the way that he did, because he kind of went and then with that fake hook was turning already, and Green, you could tell, was already defending the punch, and it was like, oh man,
we train right in the temple. We train that in the gym too. It's helped us a lot of us with either a spinning back fist or a spinning heel kick, because you just have that post there, you're already kind of twisting, the momentum's already going all the way to that side. All you have to do is pick your leg up or just swing your fist back, and boom.
It's the perfect way to hide it. It was a phenomenal knockout.
Dude, that was wicked, bro. It's one of those knockouts where it's like you don't see it so often. So like when you do, it really hits different. When you get a spinning wheel kick finish like that, I thought of I watched the Edson Barboza with the first ever spinning wheel kick against Terry Edom when he landed that. That's exactly what this reminded me of. Yeah. You just never know when you're gonna get knocked out. Timed it perfectly. But that was magic. It was magic, and so was this knockout here.
Yeah, and that's why I was so mad about the fight after, because it's like, man, you're gonna book a fight like that after this. Like, you had to know something crazy was gonna happen with that. Because when I was looking at the card before this week, when I see Ruffy versus King Green on there, that's a fun matchup, man. And Ruffy, I mean, coming in there as a really hyped up prospect from the Fighting Nerds, who obviously have produced a bunch of really good fighters at this point, I couldn't believe it, how crazy that knockout was. It was just unreal, man. Excuse me, but like,
world class.
He definitely deserves a ranked opponent next. He called out Beneil Dariush. What did you think of that?
Ooh, that's a really intriguing matchup right there.
A smart call out though. I mean, where is he ranked? Yeah, he's ranked number 9, so he would be in the top 10 if he gets that win. It's a good call.
Do you think Ruffy you think he could hang with Beneil Dariush on the ground?
I mean, dude, if he knocks him out,
it doesn't matter.
Really
but I don't.
I think all those Fighting Nerds guys are pretty good on the ground, though. I just don't think they've really had to show it.
Yeah, true.
It's just these guys on the feet are just unreal, which is so wild too, because it's a bunch of Brazilians. When you think of like those Brazilian fighters, a lot of them are like jiu-jitsu first, but Mauricio Ruffy, and then you think of Carlos Prats, John Silva, they're all really good strikers. And even if you go back to our Combat FC coverage, Jan Oliveira, he trains with those guys sometimes too. He's another guy who's a really good striker. It's wild to see that this team has
Beneil Dariush is
such a short time.
It's a leap. I'll say that for sure.
But he kind of like beating King Green. I know he's not ranked, but he's a name in this sport. He's definitely
Yeah.
established himself.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's getting up there in age, but it's still a pretty big win.
I think Bobby King Green
Yeah, I
can
know.
always count. He can always count on to give you a scrap on the feet, anyways.
He's that type of guy you got to be on it.
Neil Dariush he's gonna make it very uncomfortable, very ugly, and he's gonna throw. He is. I think he still is very technical and does have a little bit of flash here and there to them, but he's just one. I think he's one of the more complete fighters in UFC in general. But for lightweight, I mean, that's why it's like so hard to believe that he hasn't fought for the title yet, just because of how stacked this division is.
Which guy? We're talking about
Benil
Oh, Benil. All right, gotcha.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's had, some unfortunate results getting close to the top, but like you said, it just shows how good lightweight is right now. And, I mean, even on this card, we had 3 great lightweight fights on the main card. Or, I shouldn't say great fights, but like insane results and great fights.
Yeah.
But, yeah, man, I mean, overall, this whole card was really fun. Even the prelims were really interesting. A lot of good fights there, some interesting scorecards. I mean, I was talking about this before we started. Just, man, Francis Marshall, poor guy. He got robbed worse than I've seen someone get robbed in quite a long time versus Myron Santos. He lost that fight via split decision. The judge who gave it to Marshall, in my opinion, had the best scorecard out of it, giving him a 30-27. And we've talked about this before. I don't understand how you can watch a fight and one person thinks it's 30-27 one way and then the other gives it like 29-28 in the other direction. Like, I just... Yeah, I don't know how two people can see it that differently. It just makes no sense. And I thought Marshall won that fight. I really did. And you know how I am with people using the word robbery. I don't throw that around very lightly because there's a lot of fights that are just close fights and you may disagree with the score, but it's still close. This fight, I thought Marshall won and I thought it was clear, but it is what it is. But the prelims were fun anyway. I mean, the first fight of the night, I don't want to get these guys' names wrong because it was phenomenal. Let me just go because, I got it. Yeah. Ozzy Diaz versus Jordan Santos. That fight was nuts. That was the first fight of the night. That was a really fun one. Carlos Leal getting that crazy knockout over Alex Morono, who's a very tough guy to finish. Bruno Ferreira over Armand Petrosian with the armbar. That was a really fun one. I mean, dude, it's crazy, too, to think about the fact that 2 fights got scrapped on this card literally hours before it started. And we still ended up having a really good fight night with the cuts on there. So it was a fun one. Everybody was pretty excited for this pay-per-view coming in. There were a lot of really fun matchups if you're a real fan. Like, yeah, maybe in terms of those huge names, there weren't as many outside of the main and co-main event, but I think that this was a card that kind of built a lot of stars. And it had a lot of good moments throughout. And to kind of end our talk with the UFC 313 on this, speaking of stars, Robbie Lawler getting into the UFC Hall of Fame. Loved seeing that. I mean, dude, he was choked up in the crowd. I mean, it was just a beautiful moment. Hyped to see him get this nod because, I mean, I don't know about you. I know what you think about Robbie Lawler versus Rory McDonald too, but for me personally, getting into MMA when I did, 2016, 2017, 2018, Robbie Lawler was pretty much still in his prime at that point. And I was watching fights kind of in 2015. Let me put it like this. When I was getting into the UFC, it was in 2015, and it was because of John Jones and Daniel Cormier, because that was when they fought for the first time. And I was into it, but I wasn't like into it like we are now. And Robbie Lawler was the welterweight champ at that point. He has the great fight with Rory Lawler. Robbie Lawler has the great fight with double R's, man. You gotta give me that one. But Robbie Lawler has the great fight with Rory McDonald at UFC 189, their rematch. I mean, that, in my opinion, to this day, is the best fight I've ever seen. And then he fights Carlos Condit at UFC 195. That's another insane fight that doesn't get the credit I think it deserves at times. I mean, both of the fights that Robbie Lawler had against Johnny Hendricks, even Strikeforce Melvin Manhoof, he had the 2 fights versus Nick Diaz. This dude has done so much in the sport over the course of 2 decades. He ended it on a knockout win over Nico Price. Like, we've talked about this so many times, how in MMA it's so rare to see a great retirement fight like that. And his career was just one for the ages. He's one of the fighters who got me into this sport, so I'm forever grateful for him. He's one of my favorite fighters of all time, and to see him get that nod on such a big stage, super cool, man. But I know you agree with me, man. What are your thoughts about fucking Robbie Lawler and all he's done in this sport, and what does he mean to you personally as an MMA fan?
Yeah, it's not that often. It's not that often. I guess at least anymore that you get someone who's fought through so many different eras as a mixed martial artist and has seen all these kinds of different styles and has to adapt over and over and over and have the longevity like Robbie Lawler's had. Man, I feel like uh, even like especially more impressive to do that as a welterweight at that time. Like you just rattled off all the names, just like a handful of the names actually.
I mean,
But
there's so many. If I went through that guy's topology, we'd be here all day.
it's good
talking
for
about it.
it's awesome. And then someone like him, his last fight was a win, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah,
for
for
Nico
Nico
Price.
Price, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not that often you get to see legends like this. Just that's it, closed, shut, and delivered. Like no one's gonna argue. No one's gonna have any sort of qualm of what Robbie Lawler like did or could have done. Like they had,
And
I'd say, damn near a perfect, flawless career.
I was gonna say I love the package too that they did for it on the broadcast, because one of the, I forget who said it, but it was, they were talking about him in that package, and they said he started off as a fighter and he became a martial artist. Like, because when you think of Robbie Lawler in the very beginning of his career, he was that brawler. He was gonna knock you out or get knocked out, and he was really good, but he didn't have all of the tools to become a champion. And then he left the UFC, he fought in Strikeforce, had a lot of good performances in there, and then when the UFC acquired Strikeforce, obviously he returns. And after that, man, it was just insane to see how much better he got. His boxing got so much cleaner. His takedown defense became elite. And it was incredible to see him round out his game and then win the title in the way that he did in that Johnny Hendricks fight. And he had, his title reign was nuts. I mean, the Rory fight, the Carlos Condit fight, he didn't have a long title reign, but the title reign that he had was just so unbelievable for the sport. And to have a guy who's so exciting like Robbie Lawler as a champion for the time that we did, it was amazing. And it's cool to see that he's getting that love even after his career, because he deserves it, man. He's one of the most fun fighters to ever step foot in the octagon, and he really rounded out his game well and took it to the next level and became champion, which is not easy to do. So shout out to him. Glad he's in the Hall of Fame again, in a sense, because if you remember last year, the fight with Rory got inducted into the fight wing of the Hall of Fame. So he's already technically had a Hall of Fame speech. Now he's going to have a second one for himself individually, which is much deserved. But before we go, one last thing we want to talk about. This kind of came up in the middle of last week. We're thinking of having a pod for it, but figure, big pay-per-view over the weekend. We can just cover it all in the same show. But Dana White is entering the boxing realm with Turki Al-Sheikh. They've basically signed a deal to come together to make a boxing league, which really puts the whole sport of boxing into a weird spot, because now you got all these promoters like Eddie Hearn, Bob Arum, Oscar De La Hoya. They must be sweating, because when you look at what the UFC's done in MMA, they've almost monopolized it in a sense. So if they can create a league in boxing where their title matters more than the WBA, WBO, WBC, all those other organizations, which I think isn't that far out of the realm of possibility, that could be a game changer when it comes to boxing. Because you look at the politics of it right now, you got a guy like Tyson Fury, who at one point was undisputed heavyweight champ, but then two different organizations have two different contenders for him to fight. So that means he has to choose which belt that he wants to keep. Boxing still has that problem of which title means the most? They all kind of mean the same amount. So if Dana White can go into boxing with Turki Al-Sheikh, who has all of that money behind him, and they can get a few big stars and a bunch of up-and-comers and then have their own league and their own belt, man, I mean, I bet that those other boxing promoters are a bit nervous about what's going to happen here, because you have to wonder if Dana's going to cut them all out for the sake of the sport and making these huge fights. But I mean, that's just what I thought when I first saw the story, because it's pretty big news. And Dana's been teasing this for a long time, and now that he's partnered with who he's partnered with, I don't know, man. This is gonna be an interesting era. That's just my opinion. But dude, what did you think of all this?
Yeah, so it's one of those things that definitely feel it's just like one of those wait and see things. But for the time now, just the fact that it's even being talked about and brought up, I think it's pretty cool, to be honest. I don't. But in terms of translating to, let's say, like you just said, bringing in up and comers and stuff, was, how many established names can you get, anyways, right? Or
my point with that is, like, look at who he's partnered with.
Yeah.
Turki Al-Sheikh is about to make Canelo versus Crawford if probably Canelo gets through this fight. I mean, he has the access to these fighters. That's why I think these promoters are probably shaking a little bit right now, knowing that they're going to be competing against Dana White, who now has Turki Al-Sheikh in his corner, and Turki has all of that money at his disposal. And at the end of the day, I think that trumps everything in boxing, even loyalty. I mean, boxing is one of those sports where there's a lot of backstabbing going on, and I do think that I think that they're going to be able to lure a lot of guys over with that. And I think if they could create something in boxing like happened with the UFC and MMA, it's a game changer. And I think it would make the sport better in the end. And we might be biased in that because we're MMA guys and we've seen what Dana's done with the sport, and we think that he could do the same thing in boxing. But why not, man? He's got all the money behind him. Yeah. That's why I feel that way. It's interesting, man. It's very exciting, but I just definitely wanted to talk about that a tiny bit because, I mean, we know how Dana White is. He's the ultimate promoter. I do think he's the greatest promoter in fighting history. I mean, between him and Don King, I think it's like neck and neck, to be honest. But it is super exciting. I mean, I think they're going to be starting this in 2026, so it'll be a little bit before we get more updates on it. But I'm definitely excited for the future of boxing with Dana White involved. So. But in terms of the future of our channel, next week we have a fight night between Marvin Vettori and Roman Dolidze, a rematch. That should be a pretty fun fight at middleweight, and we'll definitely be here talking about that. And then, like I said in the beginning of the show, March 22nd, it's going to be a big day for the channel. 3 p.m., tune in to our live stream. We're going to be watching UFC London at Knucklehead Vintage, and we're going to be reacting to the main card live. That will be really fun. And then 8 p.m., our live stream for our live podcast is going to be starting. Like I said, guests, music, giveaways, reacting to the card, a whole lot more. We can't wait for it. It's going to be a really fun day for the channel. Like I said, if you guys are in Jersey, please pull up to the live show. It's going to be a lot of fun. We have a lot of stuff planned. And like I said, if you can't, definitely catch it on the channel. So it's going to be a real fun end of the month for the Herd Handbook, and we hope you guys join us for it. Please subscribe, and if you enjoyed this video, like, leave a comment, all that, and I guess we'll see y'all next week.
Feel just like a superstar. Doing all these drugs, I don't think I'm gonna see tomorrow. Living fast, brand new dash up in a foreign car. It's the type of shit that you be doing when you going hard.